Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Warm Up by What Prep. And today we're going to introduce you to CJ, Ben, and we have Coach Lando instead of Savannah today. Hey, what's up, everybody?
What's going on?
Hey, what's up?
How goes
Okay.
it?
We've got
It's
dates. I'm excited because now I can
Yeah.
start planning.
Oh yeah, Ben, please enlighten us with all of your planning that goes around. What changes now that you know the dates in your life specifically?
Well, I might be in Saudi Arabia because my girlfriend Katie has a race. It's an 8-hour Tough Mudder, and the first prize is like $80,000 or something like that. And we were worried
When
it was
is that?
supposed to be around the Open, but it's the weekend before the Open starts. So there's a chance I might be able to go crew her and support her there.
Nice.
Make sure she doesn't get like abducted or whatever.
Isn't it really safe there?
As a like female traveling alone,
In general, sure. All right.
So today we're going to talk about obviously it's the CrossFit season. It has changed. They've announced it 24 hours ago. We're going to go through our opinions on what you can do about it. So what are the dates changing, CJ? How does that affect the season?
Yeah, so we'll kind of start every topic with like talking about what has changed. So the Open is starting February 29th through March 18th. So it's about 2 weeks later than it I think has ever been, or at least has been in the past couple of years, especially for the 3-week. So that creates a little bit of change. We'll go through the whole season, the dates that are announced, and then we'll talk about our thoughts and then the changes, and then what changes for us specifically. So the Open is a couple weeks later, and then quarterfinals is also later. It is April 17th through the 22nd, and so it's all on the same weekend, which is really interesting. Okay, so individuals and age group are doing the same workouts on the same weekend. The way it was last year was individuals went 2 weeks after, so they would have been like roughly April 1st. So now they go April 17th. So it gives us a whole month from the end of the Open till quarterfinals, which does create good things for a lot of people. Then we have semifinals. Age group semifinals are May 8th through the 13th, which is a much shorter duration and time frame between them. We don't know when the individual quarterfinals are. We have a range, I think, right? There's a range of like May. I think it says like May and June or something like that. And then we have the games, 8th through 11th individuals and teams. We don't know when the dates are for Masters, Teens, or Adaptive. We're going to primarily talk about Masters and the individuals here because that's who we affect the most. So for all of that stuff. So dates are different. Lando, from a programming standpoint, we'll talk about like general opinions. How does that change for a lot of people that like potentially could make it all the way through to semifinals?
It allows you to have more peaks and rebuilds, right? So like you could do mini peaks or mini builds, just like if someone was doing a competition, a local comp during the programming while we're programming a cycle. So you don't have to necessarily deload completely, especially with the range being so high for the Open. Like unless you know your athlete's a bubble 25%er, but if you know they're going to get in, then you can just have it where the Open is priority on that day that they're going to do it, and then maybe a lighter day the next day, maybe like a skill lighter day, and then kind of slowly make the front end of the week a little bit heavier, lighten the week throughout. And then not really, it depends on where your athlete sits. Like you don't really start to peak them until you think they're at their most challenging part of the season. So if you know your athlete is fighting for the top 200, then they peak for quarters. And then if you know if your athlete's is going to get into semis and fighting for the games, then we try to peak them for that. Not taking anything for granted, but also allowing them to build bigger bases and really get a chance to develop their weaknesses or wherever they need to develop throughout the season instead of like peaking for the Open, then peaking for this and peaking for that. It allows a more structural build throughout.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. So everything getting pushed back and having a huge gap between the Open and quarterfinals means that we can really, for a lot of people, really prioritize that quarterfinal time frame as like where their season needs to be, and they get enough of a break from the Open. I do find it really interesting that the semifinal and quarterfinals are really, really close. So it's going to be really challenging for people to put all of their effort in to a quarterfinal with only a 2-week turnaround into a semifinal. So people are going to have to be really careful of like how hard they push where, right? Because you could definitely come up flat. We were setting up our schedule. I was setting it up for another athlete kind of into the season, and I was like, oh, we'll do our open prep and start it on this date. And then I started doing the numbers, and I was like, oh, we have time to do a whole nother range before this athlete probably needs to be ready, because we're 6 months from semifinals, which is just an insane thought. Like to the day. Yesterday was to the day. We're still 6 months from semifinals. And so it really does elongate the season. They came out and said that was one of their goals for a lot of people, was to give them an opportunity to elongate the whole season and train for a longer period of time that aren't going to make the games. So, yeah, I like the date changes. I think those dates are good. I think it fits everyone really well.
So you said that's obviously we're talking about here is the Masters and how you program around them. So the age group.
Mm-hmm.
And they've not announced the dates for the semifinal individual. So
and teams,
and teams. So if the age group, what was the date? May? Did you say
May
for
8th.
the same May 8th? Do we reckon the plan for CrossFit is to do it the individuals like the week after, or the locations not being announced yet?
When I listened to the podcast with Adrian, he said that they want to keep it the same as last year. So like the end of May, beginning June, and then 2 weeks only. So we can shoot for that range of, 3 weeks around that. I think would be a good idea.
Yeah. I think it's what it is. I think they haven't announced it yet, because I don't think they have the contracts written up of where they're going to be. Is what my guess would be. That'd be the only reason why they wouldn't announce it. Talking about location and dates, we still don't know where Legends, Teen Pit, or Wheelwad will be, which is pretty frustrating as far as location, and we don't know when they'll be, which is even more frustrating. My opinion was that they would be before. They would shorten the season a little bit for Masters and put it in the summer because of parent things and adult things and school things for kids. But the rumor mill has it, and the grapevine has it, that it's going to be basically a weekend, the whole month of August, going from Masters, teams, adaptives right after the games. I don't know where, how valid that is, but it seems like that's probably the case. So we'll see. I think it kind of stinks to elongate our older athletes' training time. I don't know why they just wouldn't put it before, but it is what it is. So we'll see when.
I guess there still is a chance for it to be before.
Yeah, for sure.
But it also kind of makes sense, I think, like showcasing each championship on a different weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And making it kind of seems like maybe the entire month of August will be specifically devoted to crowning the champions of our sport in all the different divisions. Yep. And that allows obviously viewers and, coaching companies like us, CJ and I, we just talked recently about how, all right, now we're going to at least, we're going to have a team at the CrossFit Games for sure. And then we're definitely going to have a team at the Masters Championship or the Legends Championship, because we are probably going to have a lot of athletes there, and that's exciting. I like the fact that there is an expansion. I know we haven't really talked about the number of athletes that get to qualify for each division or for each round of the competition, but I don't think it'll be too bad. It definitely is certainly going to make people pick and choose which athletes they want to support, and unfortunately there's probably going to be a lot less people than usual at the non-CrossFit Games, at the non elite and teams competition, because people, let's say if there's the Masters one is the weekend after and it's on the complete opposite side of the country, which it might be, maybe that one's in California, and we have the CrossFit Games is taking place in Texas. There's going to be a lot of people that are like, ooh, I can't do both. And there's going to be a lot of sponsors probably that are like, ooh, we can't send a team to, Dallas Fort Worth and wherever it might be, maybe California for the Masters. So it's going to be both good and bad, but WOD Prep will be at both. So
on your naming note, this is something that I think a lot of people were really concerned about, was the semantics of like what it's going to be called. And if you're on the games.crossfit.com article, it says the top masters from age group semifinals will advance to, in capital letters, the Masters CrossFit Games by Legends, which is what I was really hoping that they would call it. And I know that's like very semantics and it doesn't matter.
But it's
I
still
think it matters
called the CrossFit Games, which is awesome.
It does look like it's called the Masters CrossFit Games. And I think that is amazing. And it says the Team CrossFit Games and then the Adaptive CrossFit Games. And I think that is a very, very good sign. CrossFit is going to be highly involved in the planning, the execution of the workouts and things like that. And so, which in my opinion is a really big deal, because I think people put on good competitions. I think it's great. I've been to a lot of them, but the programming is just different when it's not done by the team at HQ and Dave and Boz, etc. So that's a really good sign. I think that's really cool if that's what it's going to be. But just based on those semantics in the article, it looks like that it is. So
I mean, that's quite an important point. If you're saying, if we're indicating that HQ are still going to do the programming, that obviously affects how you train. I'm circling back to the start of, if the age group season is really long now, and these are the changes that we're talking about, how that just affects your whole year of training.
Yeah, it's a grind, right? So, I think it's still very similar to what it was. But if we push it out another week, we push the Open out another week, it's hard to come into January and not be wanting to like push intensity and start getting ready. But for those that are games perennials that are going to make it, they have to really hold their tongue, especially now. We'll get to it. It's an easier path all the way to semifinals for really everyone that was gunning for semifinals for the past, at least for the Masters and teens, for the past couple of years. It's an easy route all the way to that point, right? So you can really choose how you want to define the way that you ramp up intensity for the season. Cool.
Okay, well, that leads us on to the percentage changes. What are the percentage changes then across the board, across the season? How have they changed it up?
So it's just to refresh everyone, the way that it worked last year for individuals was top 10% in your region, male and female, qualified for quarterfinals. And then in each region, 60 people went in North America, West, East, and Europe. And then it was 40 and 30, and then 30 for all the other divisions. Okay. So South America, Africa, Oceania, etc. So 60 for those three, and then 30 for all the others. And then I think it was 40 teams for those three, and then 20 teams for all the others. I'm not 100% sure on the teams. Now the changes for individuals are the top 25% in a region will qualify for quarterfinals, and then 40 from every region will qualify for a semifinal. That's a big change. And we'll talk about all the changes first, and then we'll talk about how we feel about them. And then semifinal, and then I don't think they referenced and talked about if they're going to do this like sliding scale based on open performances and things like that. I assume they will in some capacity, but we don't know yet. So 40 will go to semifinals. We don't know where the semifinals are, and 30 teams in each region will go, or 25%, I think, whichever is smaller. Masters, 25% of each age group will qualify for quarterfinals. In years prior, it was 10%, and then it was 30 people in each age group would qualify for semifinals, and then 10 would go to the games. Now it's 25% to quarterfinals, 200 to semifinals. So semifinals has kind of taken the old age group online qualifier position, so top 200. And then there's a sliding scale of how many athletes are going for each age group. 35, 40, and 45, 40 men and 40 women will go. 50 and 55, 30 men and women will go. And 60 and 65, 20 men and women will go. Okay? So that's a lot of athletes. I mean, we're talking 120, 240, 360, 440 athletes. That's a lot of people, which is amazing, right?
I mean,
That's
I'm
so
gonna,
cool.
I'm gonna jump in, but Ben, you called this. This is what you've been saying every single podcast. They're doing it. They're increasing the number of athletes so that they can get more money, and it's
Yeah,
definitely a business decision.
for sure.
You called
Yeah,
it.
it's a money grab.
So
Yeah, it's a money grab.
as a like big overview, like simplification, a heck of a lot more people from the CrossFit Open will qualify for the quarterfinals, which is really exciting because now we have so many more people will be excited about making it to the next level. Because it used to be, I mean, with top 10%, you had to be really good at CrossFit to make it to the next level. I think there was a year where I didn't even make it. I think I was 1 percentage point out of qualifying. And that kind of surprised me. I was like, dang, like I tried hard in the Open. I didn't redo any workouts, but man, I didn't make it. I've been doing CrossFit for a really long time and I have all the skills. So, wow, that was hard. Now that it's gone from 10% make it to quarterfinals, now that it's gone to 25%, there's a whole new level of athlete that has the potential to make it to the next level, which is exciting. And yes, it is a bit of a money grab probably because now you have thousands, and I mean tens of thousands of people extra
You
who
want,
will be
you
able
want,
to qualify.
you want the numbers? They make an extra £2.5 million just by increasing it from 10 to 25%.
If everyone registers, which
If
I
everybody
really
registers.
won't. Yeah, that's 2.5 million pounds. Whatever that means seems like a lot of money.
It's about $3 million. $3 million.
But another thing to think about is now we have a lot more people in quarterfinals. There is a potential, when you have more people in an event, the potential to bomb a workout really does increase. So that's interesting. It's like, let's say, like for myself, if there's a deadlift box jump workout, like that's my least favorite combo on earth. And if there was one of those workouts programmed in quarterfinals, if it was just the top 10% qualified and I had made it, my chances of completely bombing out decrease. But now that there's so many more athletes that have qualified for quarterfinals that will crush me in that workout, I can potentially have a much lower score. So it's just interesting that with more people on the leaderboard, the potential to have a really bad workout does increase. But it shouldn't really change who makes it to the next level because we're still going to find the fittest on earth in all the divisions. But another thing, CJ, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows. So the semifinals for teams and individuals, those are in-person events. But for Masters, those are still going to be all online, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
Correct.
I didn't know if that had changed at all. But it's interesting, though, because now that there's less people making it to semifinals, I wonder if that's simply that could also be a money play because now they don't have to put on quite as big of an event in person. Because the bigger the event in person, the more. I mean, we're talking tons and tons of money. So maybe that was strategic. It's like our cost of handling an athlete is essentially zero in the online side of things, but our cost of handling an athlete in person is very high. So let's increase the amount of online signups in the quarterfinals, and let's significantly decrease the amount of in-person people that show up. It's going to make money on both ends, I think.
I mean, I feel like it goes to actually, I think again it was what you said in the last podcast. This business strategy to make CrossFit a far more global sport. And I only say that is because Europe like really who got affected was Europe and obviously North America, where all the space slots got a lot smaller. But places like South Africa, where it isn't, the CrossFit isn't as a big a sport, their slots then got increased. And it's almost like they're looking to the smaller regions to improve the level of, level of ability of athlete. Because, like you said, if you increase the amount of slots, I'm going to use South Africa as the example, but if you increase the slots there, increase, put some more, maybe some more money into the sport there, or more, just let the sport mature there more. In time, there'll be a bit of a delay, but you'll have higher quality athletes, which will make them. I'm going to put the example that the athletes, I've very much noticed the athletes in America are far better than a lot of the other regions because the sport is more mature. And and you want to say.
Oh.
But
America.
I'm just saying.
CJ, with the way that it's written now, and the amount of people from each semifinal that qualify for the games, have they have released the amount that actually make it from semifinals in each of the divisions?
No, I mean, no, they haven't. Right,
They have not.
40 will go. Right, 40 will go. Right, still 40 men and women, and 40 teams to the games. Right, to the game. So
there probably it's safe to assume there will not be as many bids available in the regions that tend to have less fit athletes, right? They probably will have some sort of sliding scale there, you think?
It should still be the same, because you can't, if they took spots away, right? So of the people that went, roughly 50, like 6% or something like that, of spots were handled by North America and Europe, right? And so it should for sure still stay. No, I lied. Like 80% of the spots, right? So like each one almost got 10, right? So if you look, like, just, I think North America was like 8 or 9, and then 8 or 9 for both, right? So that's 75% of the spots last year, right? So almost 30 people came from North America, West, East, and Europe. And so if they change that, that would be crazy, right? Like that wouldn't make any sense at all. So I assume the sliding scale would still be there, because to give 5 spots to Africa or Asia, especially on the female side, would be wild, right?
What would happen is, what I was kind of alluding to is, like, what I assume they will still avoid is the chances of someone qualifying and traveling to the CrossFit Games who's like not even remotely in the same ballpark as the people who didn't qualify out of the stronger regions, or out of the stronger regions. Because we saw that a few years ago when they did, like, if you win your country, you get to come. And then there were some people who couldn't even climb a rope. Right. So I think we're going to avoid that, which I think is very important when you have the CrossFit Games. You say these are the best athletes that we have, and they can't even do some of the workouts. I think we're going to avoid that this year. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And so to kind of hit back on why the changes. So I was trying to figure this out. For sure, money grab is obviously the first thing that came to mind of why they would take away spots and then give spots somewhere else. So my theory, because they really didn't change any spots, right? They actually added more to the overall, right? I think it's actually more total athletes go to semifinals, just in different regions. So my thought then is the cost to run 30 to 40 is relatively novel and not changed. And then the cost to run 40 to 60 athletes might require like it's over the bell curve, right? Like it kind of tips the ship, and then it's like a bigger chunk of whatever money or equipment or resources that are mandatory. My other thought is, one of the reasons why, if you listen to Dave talk of why they're going to this model, is so they can move the CrossFit Games on a whim, year to year if they want, or every 2 years, in a single location and not have to restructure the whole thing. My thought then is maybe they're trying to do the same thing with semifinals, is a plug and play method that can just be repeated week to week without lots of different planning. It's the same exact planning everywhere. It's the same people, same organization, same time, same blah, 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 blah. And then doing 30 to 60 requires a different design and structure and more work and more time commitment. So
Yeah,
that was
it makes a lot of sense.
That was my other thought.
So they're basically, it seems, that's a great point. It's like they're creating a system. The
Right.
reason the CrossFit Games are no longer dependent on the layout of Madison, Wisconsin, is because they're like, all we need is a stadium that hosts X amount of people watching, and we can run the CrossFit Games because we can go to any stadium. We don't have to have a field nearby with a this and a that. It's just like, all we need is a stadium, and there's a lot of those on Earth. And to your point, TJ, if we have the same amount of people that go to each semifinal, it's literally like we have the same events, same heat times, same, like you can basically plug and play the exact same system.
Right.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I wouldn't say it's a money grab overall. I think we're just looking at this is actually good business strategy. We're going to increase our online signups, which don't cost us any extra money to run, and all we're doing is making pure profit. And then we're reducing the amount of in-person athletes at some events, and we can just plug and play the same event across all the different regions. I think overall it's a great strategy.
I mean, and I'm following on from that as well. It also changes the wider CrossFit industry over the next 5 years, because their business objective is they do want to grow as a business, which means you put these systems in place, but then individually as coaches and programming in companies like WordPrep, where we can predict a lot more of like what's going to happen. So if we know there's always going to be, I know, I thought you guys would like this.
Music to my ears.
Yeah, because if you've been playing the guessing game of, well, a new movement might come out. How do we predict for that? How do we train for that? How do we know what's kind of going to roughly come up? If they reduce the amount of variables, like the amount of different things that could come up, which is what they're doing, they're standardizing and they're systemizing everything. It means, athletes can be training smarter. They can train far more formulaic, and you guys can actually just be increasing those 1% even more, rather than having to kind of predict for the unknown. And I know it's a little bit of the CrossFit's brand values, but yeah, at some point that was always going to go away from that. So there was anything else that was, with all of these changes, that was going to really affect the average gym member who are looking to just improve his CrossFit and improve as a sport? Like, I think the quarterfinals change, I think you made a very good point, Ben, that actually it could be really more motivating to the CrossFit community. You get more wins, you get more gratification, there's longer time to do Friday night lights. It does feel a little bit like it's going back to the 5 week, like a broken 5 week structure, like how it used to be. But it's still a great way for CrossFit gyms, the community, to come together and support the athletes, because there are more people now going to be involved in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think there's a couple points to that. Talking about the 25%. If you are an RX athlete, you can do all the movements. Any age group, individual, you are probably going to make it to quarterfinals. That's really how that kind of boils down, which, like you said, can really revitalize the gym and morality, and like, hey, I can go to this next stage. Now, on the flip side of that, everyone's complaint is now there's not as much prestige and cloud of saying you made quarterfinals or whatever, right? But to be fair, the term quarterfinals means 25% of where it started, right? So theoretically, it's still kind of on par, right? And so what they also did was, I think, to really hammer this in, is they extended the dates of quarterfinals and semifinals as far as how long you have to do the workouts, right? And I think they did that for a couple of reasons. One, to convince more people to come in. Maybe they don't have to take off work, or maybe they can do a workout on Wednesday and they got to work Thursday and Friday, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they're going to take away the submission deadlines during that. That would make sense, right? Because that was one of the biggest complaints. It was hard for some people. My opinion on that is, once you get to this stage, this is like where hobby, community, and fun becomes sport and money and things. And so I think you got to figure that out on your own. But they changed it, and they're, again, another drive to like include as many people in a longer season as possible, which was also another one of their goals, was to extend the season for as many people as they can, right? So if you're top 25%, your season is extended. You get to really plan and play for all of March and all the way through April, right? So you get 2 months of like real focus, competing and hard training, etc., and maybe even more months leading up to the Open, which I think is really good across the board.
And CJ,
now, the one thing that go ahead.
I was going to say, just to clarify for everyone. So the old quarterfinals, correct me if I'm wrong, it used to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and each and there was like they released like workout 1 and 2, and you had to submit those on Friday by a certain time, and then 2 or 3 and 4 would be Saturday by a certain time, and then they release some more, and then it'd be by Sunday or something like that. And you're thinking that this year, because they extended it to now, I believe it's Wednesday through Sunday as opposed to Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I didn't look at the exact dates. It's 5 days.
5 days.
17th through the 22nd.
Yeah, through the 22nd. Okay. Like I wonder if they are going to keep the same amount of workouts and they just say, "Here's your workout for the day," and it's just like it basically what that does is it allows some affiliates to like program the workout, and then they have maybe a couple athletes they have to standardize it for. So it's like a workout per day, or maybe there'll be 5 workouts or 6 workouts where you double up on one day. But I'm wondering if they're just going to make it a lot easier to be like, hey, here's your workout, and we just need to have scores for all of these by the end of the time.
That's what I think. I think that's going to be the case. And now on the flip side of that, this is a really good way to build community. But this quarterfinals is as important as it's ever been for individuals and teams, because there's now a smaller amount of people going in this same workout, the same thing for masters going to 200, which is important, but a little less important, right? Like those 200 are going to, like the people that are going to go to the games are going to make the top 200. And so, but for individuals, North America, West and East, you got 30 spots, and you're going to get those 30 spots from a online workout that is the same for individuals all the way to 54-year-old athletes. It's the same workout. So you can sign up for both. That was what they wanted to do, because they're really going to try and push these 35s and the random Sam Briggs, Kristen Holta 40-year-olds that are like, oh, I can still go to the CrossFit Games and do both sort of thing. They want to really hone in on them. And so they're giving them the same thing. A lot of people do both, right? A lot of people do both. So they want to pay their $100, 50 and 50, hypothetically, to put their name on both leaderboards. And they can do that now, which is great. I think that's a really good money grab. I think it's also a good idea for the people that have the chance to do both, which is only a few. But it is, if money's in the game and this is your professional career and you can go be at both, et cetera, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, did you know, if you actually look how that 60-40 does like affect who goes to the games? There was a good chunk of athletes who were outside of that 40 slot. They came between the 40 and 60 slot. Like the only one that comes to mind was Bethany. How do you say her name?
Shabern.
No, yeah, I know it's
Flores.
Flores. Thank you. I knew what the new marathon name was. She was outside of the 40, and still went to the games. And so I would be interested. Like, I'm not talking the top 10 games athletes here, you know, the Tias and the Lauras and all of that. But there's a few games athletes who do go to the games every single year, who seasonally they do like sit outside of these cutoff points now, and how that does affect the later season and who goes.
Yeah, I actually think that's my opinion. Take it. I think that's the worst and most least valid argument, because we used to take 60 in a region that was like 7 states in the country, right? At one point, right? So like when Ben was competing in 2015-16, the super regional initially was like 60 people, or like it was a regional of 30. So like in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina, you get 40 from just that little chunk, let alone the whole thing to regionals, which is sort of like the semifinals now. Those athletes, you have a couple that Yellow Host has won. He won an event they could have redone workouts. They could have known that they were out. There also would have been other people that made it from semifinals and took those spots that didn't make it, right? So that people that didn't make it, that Bethany came in. So whoever was in 10th that didn't get 9th would have made it in instead of Bethany, right? And so maybe that athlete finishes higher than Bethany, but we don't know, right? That's definitely more of a like a retroactive conclusion of like, oh, this makes a huge difference. I don't know. I don't like that one because it's like, because the athletes that didn't make it in because of them could have had a way bigger impact, right? But maybe the workouts were where it was going to be. Bethany's been hurt for forever and she's still hurt, and so like maybe her input isn't, or her influence into the games was irrelevant, but the girl that came in, whatever, the last place that didn't get in the West would have had a bigger impact on the game's whole year, right? So we don't know that, right? I don't think that makes the biggest.
It's a competition
difference.
Competition at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. This is just the new rules of the competition. Yeah, this is just the new rules of the competition, and so it was 120 for all of North America 2 years ago, right? And then it was just like top 120 of how you finished. So the West only had like 25 people if you broke down the like where it went, right? So like in overall 120, Bethany wouldn't have made it this year, wouldn't have made it like if you combined all of them, right? She wouldn't have made it 2 years ago, right? So, I think it's a point and it's there. It's not a point that I like. I think there's definitely like, no, whatever. So, with the workouts being the same, I want to ask Rolando, and this is where his, and he brought up a really good point kind of in our text thread. The Open, quarterfinals, semifinals games. Well, you had a thought of like how the flow is going to sort of go. You want to talk about that?
Yes, I was thinking, right, so if the goal is to make it more accessible to people, and so one thing we always used to hear, especially as coaches and as athletes, was always like, oh, if I would have just made it to quarters, that would have been my workout, right? The guys who are stronger, the guys who can do the grunt work, but I just couldn't get past the capacity work of the Open, so now I can't get to quarters and show off my strengths and my muscle up skills and things like that. So I think that gives those athletes this chance to kind of like prove it and gives them the chance to throw their hat into the ring. So I think that I was thinking we're going to start off using the hierarchy, the CrossFit hierarchy. It starts off with metabolic conditioning, then gymnastics, weightlifting, and then ends with sports. It has nutrition on the bottom, but that's just for the lifestyle. So I was just starting at Metcon. So I kind of think the Open is going to be more of like how every Open is. It's like workouts 1, 2, and 3, especially if you go back to 2012, where they always got progressively harder. Like workout 1 was always super simple, something everybody can do, high capacity. But the top athletes were still the top athletes in those. So in the perfect world, like you can just make 3 simple workouts for the Open, keep the weights very moderate, and then everybody can just get as far as they can get or finish as fast as they get. So I'm thinking do a shorter workout, 3 to 5 minutes, do a moderate workout, 8 to 12 minutes, and then a longer workout, 18 to 20. Then you test all phases of capacity, right? Just basic capacity. And then when you get to quarters, that's when you start adding in the muscle ups, the bar muscle ups, the crossovers, the heavier weight. But with the workouts being the same for everybody, you have to think like the workout has to be accessible to the 50-year-old, right? So when we're just thinking about the workout, at least is going to start with something that a 50-year-old can do and the most elite can do, right? So either it's going to be progressing or there's going to be some type of bottleneck. But I think to make it right where the 50-year-olds can actually finish workouts and do things like that, I even think those workouts are going to maybe progress towards the very end where like only some of the top athletes will get to. And that's kind of how I think it's going to go. Like we're not going to see the 185 snatch box jump over workout, right? Like I don't think we're going to see that in quarters anymore. Because how many 50-year-olds can, you know what I mean? They probably can, but what's the percentage of that? Especially if you're taking the top 200, then you're going to have tons of zeros and stuff. So I think that was where my thought was going, looking at the structure of it. So basically it's just, I would keep working on the skills that you don't have and keep working on your capacity if you want to get to those range and then compete in quarters. So
all I know is that was like my favorite workout of all time because it was short, it was fast, and it was heavy, and I loved it. So I think CJ was beating me at the time in the quarterfinals, and then he wasn't, and it made me happy.
Yeah.
But
anyways, so
one point, yeah, no, he doesn't want to dwell on that. But one point I would like to say is maybe you're right, but every time we think we know what's going to happen for the Open, it's like for instance, 2023, it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure the first workout will be simple. Everyone will be able to do it. It'll be dumbbell snatches and burpee box jump overs or something like that. And then it was 14-4, right? It had ring muscle, it had toes to bar, ring muscle ups, cleans. It was everything. So I hear you, but anytime we inject logic into how the program is going to go, it disappears. So
for sure,
who knows what's going to happen? And so for everyone listening, like, yeah, hypothetically, it could be more capacity stuff, low skill, low weight. But if you're not training for the skills, if you're not ready for the weight, you could be in big trouble, like we've seen in several Opens before, where they have something really heavy, or they have something really progressive, or they have something that has that high skill, and we're just like, where the heck did this come from? So I think you might be right, Orlando, but we should always prepare for the unknown and unknowable, which is be ready for anything.
It's so true. Like, I really like Lando. Like, your logic makes complete sense. I can totally follow that, and I can totally see that. But I just don't want it. I want the heavy. I want the short. And I want the high skilled. So I want Ben to be right here.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely will train our athletes for everything. But it's just something I thought about that it would make sense if
it totally makes sense. I just don't want it.
Right. I think the last thing to consider is Dave is back. Dave is the director of the CrossFit Games, like by title, which means that he will for sure have a hand in programming, whether or not how much that hand is or all of the hand. Something to consider as well, right? So I think the one thing that we saw a lot of in Open, quarterfinals, semifinals were these bottleneck-driven pieces, which is how Boz writes programming. If Dave is back, we will see for sure less of those, without a doubt, right? Because Dave does obviously write them; they happen. But if you watch Dave's weekend review, which if you're a coach or an athlete that's competitive and you care about the sport and the information, Dave talks a lot about himself because that's kind of the point of thing. But he does get questions about training and implements, and he always says the same thing when it comes to programming. He's like, I will use the foundations of CrossFit as the driver for all levels of the sport. And he says that almost every episode. So another reason why Orlando's logic makes a lot of sense, but that we will see more traditional burn it down, like pain cave type things instead of the bottleneck stuff. And we should for sure train the skills that you don't have. Always. You should never come into the Open and like, either muscle ups are not going to show up. Like, shame on you. That would be a terrible decision. But if Dave is back and he has a hand in the programming, you will for sure see a different design compared to like 23.3, right? Like that workout, that was like fine. I like going through, I don't know, like a junkyard and finding a brand new Ferrari. We were just like, woof, where did this even come from? Like, it was just so out of place for like even the Open. I thought it was really interesting. So something to consider as well for all you athletes and coaches out there, for the millions of people listening to the warm-up by Walk Right.
On that note, I think we've pretty much covered everything that the coach, the box owner, the athlete, they need to kind of start preparing themselves for the Open and how they can combat the different changes. All right, so that's a wrap for another episode. Have a great day, everybody.